to this day, she'd explain to me how the count was even at 1-1 or 2-2. And to this day, I don't get it. Yes, the numbers are even. I can count. But the events needed for the outcome of each count, a walk for balls or a strikeout for strikes, are not even. I pondered this conundrum over and over and over again, and I've never been able to resolve it. It's probably why I couldn't get a date through most of high school. But that memory and all the other ones on those evenings of which I didn't want to watch baseball but actually grew up to love it, along with countless other memories shared with my grandma, were part of building me as a baseball fan. Other sports don't have that same kind of everyday connection, of everyday experience, of natural connection between family members and the game that baseball has. One thing is, other sports don't have the longevity, and while baseball isn't the same as it was in the early 1900s and has been passed down generation by generation, it is roughly the same game. The dimensions of the field are roughly the same. The rules are roughly the same. Now they're starting to change that, and I think that's a problem. But with football, for example, that went from no helmets and 3 yards in a cloud of dust to the high-powered passing game we see now. The sport of football reinvents itself almost once a generation. It's actually part of the strategy of the game. The reinvention of how you win, how you play winning football, is part of the game of football itself. But that break in continuity of how the game is played makes it much more of a game that's best experienced in the moment and shared within that generation, within that iteration of football, than it is to be passed down across generations, such as baseball, where a double switch in the 1950s is pretty much the same as a double switch now. And fans of those generations can share that with fans of this generation. Football doesn't have that. Basketball has also reinvented itself in recent years, from not having a three-point line to the physical style of the 80s and the 90s to the three-point barrages we see now. The players and the game have changed, less than football, but more than baseball. Basketball has changed across generations. As a result, the personal history shared among generations of fans is reduced. Basketball had another problem, the media distribution problem. Up until the 80s and 90s, it was a very niche sport, a very regional sport. Then games were actually finals games. NBA finals games were tape delayed into the mid-80s. It just didn't have the connection. Fans of baseball have shared generations of games, first on the radio, then on early versions of television, and for many, many, many decades more than basketball. Now, baseball does have a problem. The passing of history among generations is waning, and I see it as a major threat to the future of baseball. Younger generations of fans are experiencing the world differently and much more quickly than they have in any other generations, and that won't stop. That acceleration isn't going to reverse. It's not that they don't care what their grandmas and grandpas enjoyed as sports fans. Those pieces will become part of them as they grow up, but they're not beholden to those memories. They're not beholden to those sources of information. Unlike me, I didn't have any other options. Younger fans have unlimited options. The result is going to be less shared experiences and memories that connect baseball to younger generations. The impact has already been felt over the last decade and a half or 20 years. Viewership, attendance, and identification as baseball fans by people under the age of 30 is on a huge decline. Since football and basketball don't need the connection to history as much as baseball, they are the beneficiaries. Look at basketball. Its popularity is exploding. And football has replaced baseball and has done it for a long time now as America's favorite game. In other sports, global sports, such as soccer and to some extent hockey, they are also gaining more fans, while baseball continues to lose the younger fans. I try to be objective about the impact of technology on life, and in this instance on sports. Less important than the great relationship I shared with my grandma was my identification as a baseball fan, which grew through these memories, through these experiences, and I would hate not to have had them. I would hate if they weren't a part of who I am. And I know other young people won't have similar memories. They won't have similar experiences. This void is going to be filled with other entertainment, other experiences, and other options. They're going to have fulfilling lives, don't get me wrong, and they may have great and wonderful relationships with their family, but it's just going to be through different means, and I don't know how that works because my experiences were different. So I hope that the personal connections that they have are as strong and meaningful as the ones I shared through the game of baseball with my grandma. Now, let's take this full circle. Let's go back to baseball, cheating, and its history. I have long struggled with the steroid era and what to do with stars and whether they should be included in baseball's Hall of Fame. I've tried to adopt a hybrid approach to this, that players who have Hall of Fame credentials before the steroid era or before they were associated with it, that they should go in. This has allowed me to shoehorn Barry Bonds, who I think is a full-fledged cheater, as a Hall of Famer because, as a Pittsburgh Pirate, in his early days, before his head grew to the size of the Eiffel Tower, he amassed Hall of Fame credentials and deserved to be in my estimation. Then I'd also exclude, wholly and completely, those players like Alex Rodriguez, who I felt was clearly a cheater much earlier in his career, admitted to it over and over and over, and didn't really have the pre-steroid resume of a Bonds. The problem is that it would create the spectrum of judgment on each and every player. That type of standard really doesn't work when talking about the Hall of Fame. As a result, I think you have to let the whole era in. The best players of every generation are in. And as we discussed, these players looked for and found and utilized competitive advantages, cheating, and illegal means at every turn. Players in the 60s, 70s, and beyond took amphetamines or greenies as a pick-me-up to help them deal with the grind of the baseball season. Players often joked about them being in a bowl in the locker room, being available from the trainer. It was accepted, although the pills themselves were illegal at worst, and at best they weren't being properly prescribed. This was substance abuse. This was a competitive advantage. It was systematic cheating. It's likely that steroids or other chemical advantages were also being used across all of baseball during the steroid era. The point is we don't know who cheated. We don't know when, and we don't know how. As a result, the right move is to include the best of the generation and explain the issues as needed and educate fans who go to the Hall of Fame, who find out about this era. We should rightfully expose those who cheated if we know it. And if Jose Canseco wants to tell us who he stuck in the butt with a needle, that should be included too. The whole story should be told. It's the best path of connecting the fans of the future to the game of the past while allowing the best players of those generations to be recognized as the best players of those generations. If baseball has encouraged or tolerated or at best has been infiltrated by cheating throughout its history, and I think it has, then every generation deserves to have the best of the best included. Okay, that's my show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Scott Longert could not have been better. Please go see him at one of his book signings coming up. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. Have a wonderful week.